Was good, y'all? Track Kennedy with StudioSounds.com back with a brand new tutorial. In this tutorial, I'll be breaking down a beat I made last week with a Swae type sound in mind. I was listening to his album Swaecation, so that's where the inspiration came from. I did the entire beat using more plaques and Exo the Stars for Massive. All the drums are from the Legends Never Die drum kit and the Foundation percussion pack. I also used one single chant from the Phone Home sample pack for anyone interested. I also included this FLP as a free bonus for anyone who picks up our More Plaques bank this week. If you already have the bank, the FLP will cost you nothing extra. Just make sure you download the updated bank from the members area to get the FLP. I just quickly want to say thank you guys so much for the support over the last few videos, and to everyone picking up new banks and kits. We genuinely appreciate and hope to bring you guys a lot more content. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe for more videos, and without further talking, let's go ahead and jump into this beat. So for this particular track, the very first thing that I'm going to start off with is the hook, and then I'll go ahead and break down the verses for you guys as usual. So usually I never really start off with drums, but for this particular track, I wanted to start getting that kind of island groove to it right away and then building over the top of that. So I started off with the drums, and the drums are right here, really simple. And that's basically the entire pattern. So what we have in here is basically a couple different kicks, or just two really, I should say, and these are both from the Legends Never Die drum kit. One kind of plays the bottom end more, and I thought that sounded good, but I wanted to add more of a top end layer to it as well to make it sound a little bit more organic. So I found this second kick, and I threw some effects on there, just a reverb and a heavy EQ to get rid of the bottom end, so it doesn't clash with the first kick. So when you layer these two together, this is what you have. Then the very next thing I added was this snare. And I thought that snare sounded good, but I wanted to kind of add a second little layer to that snare to make it just sound a little bit more interesting. So what I did was I added this little rim shot in here and really shortened it up. And then I basically just pitched it down a little bit to what I felt kind of matched that snare. Selected all of it, made sure that my snap was set to none, and I just used my shift key to move them slightly over from where the other snare hits. So when you combine them together, you get just a cool layered little sound that sounds something like this. So I thought that sounded a lot cooler than just kind of the dry snare by itself. From there, I added just a little tambourine sound for kind of percussion. Just kind of help it move a little bit, used a little quantize on there, and just kind of played with the velocities to make it sound a little bit more live. And then the very last thing to kind of finish off the drums is just this little real crash from the Legends Never Die drum kit. So I thought that just sounded good. It was a nice little clean groove to work with. And then if you wanted some a little bit more busy, or kind of, I guess, a little bit more similar to what everybody else is doing right now, all you have to do is just fill in these 4 steps to have this kind of pattern. So if you wanted to, you could even start with the other pattern and then just kind of switch it up as you went. But like I said, this was a cool little groove to work on. So let's jump in the next section. I'll show you guys what I layered on top of this. So once I had the drums, the very next thing that I wanted to add to this were just some cool chords to start kind of building a melodic layer over the top of it. So what I started off with was this keyboard sound called the Synth Celeste. And this is a preset for Massive from our More Plaques bank, and these are the chords that are played, basically just 2 chords. And for this last little section, just to transition to the next chord and make it a little bit more interesting, I just got rid of the top note and just had it move over that way. So the chords by itself sound like this. And there was also a slight strum on here, as you guys can see. They're slightly off the grid to make them sound a little bit more natural. And then I also added a EQ and a delay just kind of make it not too bright. Got rid of some of the bottom end so it didn't really clash with my drums or my bass line. And then just threw a delay in here just because this track is going to be nice and airy and open. I feel like delays are just an easy way to add some groove and some movement to your tracks and your instruments without having to do too much. But anyway, this is what it sounds like with the drums combined. Starts giving you a nice little groove, something that's still nice and open and somebody could sing over, so I really like that. So let's go ahead and jump to the next section and show you guys what I continue to layer. So the very next thing I added was another little pattern from Massive, this little noisy bell preset from more plaques as well. And basically when I'm doing kind of R&B type tracks or stuff like this where I'm kind of expecting somebody to sing over it, the main challenge for me usually is trying to figure out how do I fill up the track and make it interesting but not overdo it. I'm not sure how many of you guys have worked with writers and stuff like that, but when you start adding a lot of crazy melodies, for some writers actually it does work and they love stuff like that, getting kind of an idea from a crazy hook or a crazy lead. But a lot of them, when you kind of go too crazy, it almost kind of doesn't really leave a lot of space for singing. So that's kind of what I'm always trying to balance when I'm doing tracks like this, is how do I add kind of cool, unique touches without overfilling the track. So the very next thing, or I guess a lot of the next things that I'm going to be adding in here are kind of more ambient play in the background, but they help to just really kind of fill up the track. So the very first thing that kind of does that is this little noisy bell sound, which I kind of played almost as like an ARP with just 3 notes kind of going up every so often. Kind of following along to what the chords are doing, but when you layer that in with everything else, this is what you have. And then the way that this is kind of staggered with this note right here playing where the chords are kind of fading, I feel like that just kind of helps continue the movement and the mood of the track. So I thought that sounded pretty good. But I wanted to continue with that. So the next thing I added to this was this second little ambient pluck. And this one is actually from EXO the Stars. That particular bank just has a ton of cool little ambient type sounds, so you can use it for like weekend type stuff, but you can also use it pretty much for anything that requires ambient pads, plucks, things like that. So the next thing that I added was an ambient pluck from here with just 2 notes playing, and when you combine those with the other pluck, this is what you have. And if you pay attention to the timing of those, they're actually playing with the actual snares. So just kind of help highlight that snare and that groove as well. I thought that sounded pretty good in there. So that's kind of where stuff starts to really take shape if you take a look at the track. So let's go ahead and jump to the next section. I'll start breaking down the other little pieces. So before I actually jump to the next pattern, I want to go ahead and just break down this little sample in here that just adds some suspense. So this is what the actual sample by itself sounds like. Let me just go ahead and solo that for you guys quick. So it just adds a nice little suspense to the track. So to actually create the pattern, all I did was I got rid of the second little chord section, this chord progression, and then just exported it as an audio clip. From there I had this. I went ahead and I reversed it, normalized it, set it to 2 bars generic so it doesn't change pitch, and then just threw a really heavy reverb on here, turn the decay up to around 3.5 to 4 seconds, turn the wetness up to 100%, and then turn the dry down to around 60 to 65%, just have a nice kind of washed out type sound. Then I threw a delay in here just because if you look at it kind of where it breaks into that little empty space where the chord isn't really as noticeable, so I thought a delay just kind of moving through there would be a nice touch. And then I just chopped the chord up. Obviously once you reverse it, the chords are going to be, well, just the 2 chords are going to be in reverse order, so you want to just go ahead and chop it up and bring it back to the right order so they match. And when you combine it with the rest of the elements that I've shown you guys so far, this is what you have. here's what it sounds like without it one more time, just so you guys can see. It's very subtle, but my opinion adds a nice little touch in there. That's where that little first sample came from. Let's jump to the next section, continue. So the very next thing that I added to this was actually just a bass line. So I used this little future R&B sub 2 from Exo the Stars again, and just played 2 notes just to really match the chords. Really simple, but here's what it sounds like. Kind of helps tie everything together and just adds a nice little bottom end to the track. So from this point, I felt like I just had kind of like a nice little groove going, but I really wasn't sure like kind of where to take it. I felt like, okay, this sounds good, but it needs something to kind of differentiate it for the hook. So on patterns, I guess pattern 6, I added this little flutter flute from Exo the Stars again, and this is what it sounds like just with the flute right now. So I thought that sounded really cool, was a nice little melodic piece for the hook, but I felt like, okay, you could just use something else, maybe like a response section or something like that. So I was going through a bunch of different synths trying to find stuff to put in there, but I just couldn't really find anything that fits. So I just kind of had an idea to take this little pattern and go ahead and export it as an audio clip. And I thought it would be kind of just interesting to see what it sounded like reversed, just because it's not hitting on the 1 and the timing is kind of weird of it. So that was basically pattern 6 right here. So all I did with pattern 6 was normalize or reverse it. I'm not sure if this is 2 or 4 bars, so it's actually 4 bars to stretch it out. And then from there, I went ahead and I dropped it into the playlist and chopped it up. So basically just kind of try to chop up the timing with, when you reverse it, obviously this little section is going to be in the front, this is going to be the second part. So I just went ahead and I chopped it up to make sure that they actually match what they're playing. So when you add that little second section, this is the piece that I feel like kind of makes the beat, but here's what it sounds like with it in the beat. So I thought that was just a really cool sound to fit the melodies in there very well. So from there, I just add another little delay in here to match the theme of the track. Again, a heavy reverb to make sure it matches the other sample, just kind of in tone and texture. And then another little parametric EQ, basically just kind of help get rid of the frequencies I don't need. And then from there, I also added a pancake VST, which is just an auto panner, but it's just really awesome because you can just move stuff along, change stuff really quickly, really easily in here. So that's kind of why I like it. But anyway, once you have everything together, this is what you have again. So that's basically where I was at, and I felt like some kind of more percussive layers and stuff could really help the track out. So let's jump in the next section. I'll show you guys what I picked for that. So for the very first percussive element, what I found was this little sound called the melodic toms in the more plaques bank, I believe. Yeah, so it's in the more plaques bank, and it's just called the melodic toms. And I just went ahead and I layered this with the snare pretty much, just to kind of add like a softer touch to the snare, which I thought would just kind of sound cool for the hook to make it kind of warmer. So when you combine this with the track, this is what you have. So I thought that sounded good already, just gave it, like I said, a warmer type sound, but I still wanted some other little percussive elements in there. So the very next thing I added to this were these little pen type sounds from the Foundation percussion pack. So they all have slightly different tones, and if you look at it, they're just kind of staggered in how they hit with the actual snares. So these first two just kind of hit with the snares directly, and then the third one just hits over here as kind of like a little last piece. But when you combine it with the track, that's what you have. So a really, really simple element, but the more you kind of layer these simple little stacks together, the bigger of a sound, the more full sound you get. And that's just kind of something that's always kind of impressive to me, that something so simple, in my opinion, can make the track sound so much better. But anyway, that's the little percussive element. So the very last thing I added was this little chant type sound. This little reverse crashes in there, but I don't believe it was even used in the track. But anyway, so this is a little chant from the Phone Home sample pack. I always find just random sounds in there to add stuff to tracks that I think sounds good. So for this particular track, I felt like this sound just added a nice energy to it, and it almost had like an ethnic type sound to it that I just kind of really liked. So all I did was just put a heavy reverb again on it just to really wash it out. Kept the dry section up on this one just because I wanted to have a little bit more energy in the other sounds. Then threw a little delay on there to give it some movement, and then just an EQ to get rid of the bottom end. So when you add this to the track, this is what you end up with. So that pretty much covers most of the elements in the track. From here, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the transition effects and then just the layout of the track real quick. So let's jump into the next section and wrap this beat up. So as I told you guys, the very last thing that I have in here are the transition effects. If you guys take a look at the intro, it's kind of self-explanatory. You guys see I just dropped a bunch of stuff out and just kind of let the track build with this little last kind of catchy melody, in my opinion, bringing it in. But then to kind of complete everything, I started adding some transition effects in there. So the very first one is from Massive, and it's just this sound real quick. Let me show you guys. It's just a noise wash, and this is from more Plaques as well. So it sounds like that, but when you combine it with the track, this is what you have. So that's the first transition there, and it moves into the verse from here. So for the verse, as you guys can see, I just got rid of some of the patterns, just kind of keep it a little bit more empty and open. And then I also took this little second reverse flute, and for the first part of the verse, I kept it a little bit more open by removing one of the layers. And then as the verse moves, it actually kind of gets a little bit more full over here. And then for this little second section, kind of switch it up and give it a little bit more movement, I added those little pen clicks back into it. So let's actually just go ahead and jump to the verse section and listen to kind of how that plays out, and I'll show you guys the last little transition piece. from there it basically transitions back into the hook. So if you guys take a listen to over here, I basically have this first transition effect, which is a little bit kind of more bare by itself, and then I have this little second one, which is just this little riser to build energy. I felt like this little riser just needs a little bit more suspense to kind of build it into the hook. So when you combine this little, actually let me just play this for you guys solo real quick and I'll combine it. So that's the second little riser that's playing in there, but when you combine it with everything else, that's what you end up with for the transition. So that pretty much does it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys learned something new. As always, if you want to pick up any kits, make sure to use the coupon in the description. It's only going to be active for the first 30 people to use it. Thank you guys again for watching. Until next time, track Kennedy with StudioSounds.com.